Hey, I'm Rachael,
And I'm Amanda, and this is Beyond a Ballot.
powered by DoorDash. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond a Ballot. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Rachael.
Well, it's been quite a debate extravaganza around the world. I know we have the U.S. debate that happened a couple of days ago. And, here in BC, we're in the middle of an election campaign and we are doing radio debates. And next week will be the TV debate. I forgot the word TV. How crazy is that?
Mom brain.
Yeah, but like debate brain, because I've been just going through all of these debates and prepping and listening and trying to dissect. So we're very lucky to have a wonderful guest on with us today, Scott Reid, who has done much debate prep. But did you watch the U.S. debate the other night?
Sure did.
What'd you think?
Well, I spent part of it in the fetal position, feeling sad because I thought things ended on a high note for Walz, but I did think that he struggled throughout the debate, primarily with nerves. I think that JD Vance, who has really actually struggled so much in the campaign, with just a number of attacks that haven't landed well on him, ended up presenting quite well in the debate. Seemed polished, seemed confident, was able to speak to camera. I thought in contrast, Wells had a hard time getting his message out, and his kind of folksy thing that he does, which is very endearing, did not come off as quite as endearing in a debate. And I thought that while he had some punches to pack, he couldn't quite land them. And so he was a little circular in the way he was delivering some of his messages. And he looked a little skittish to me. He was kind of looking around a lot, where Vance had a way of really speaking to camera and engaging. And I don't want anyone who's listening here to think for a moment that this has changed my view on JD Vance.
They don't.
Just
don't
speaking
worry.
specifically about the debate delivery, which I'm excited to get into with Scott Reid because he's an expert and he'll share. But what did you think?
So I thought that this was actually a win for both of them.
You did? Okay.
I did. And here's why. So JD Vance has been getting the runaround when it comes to all of these, I'm going to say, crazy comments that he's been making, cat ladies, blah, 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 reproductive health, those types of things. That was never really put on the table for him. So he never was put to task on any of those comments. So I think that was good for him. I think that his debate prep was quite obvious. I mean, he was looking directly into the camera with these big, beautiful blue eyes. And he was saying, like, here's what I'm going to do for the American people. He didn't look crazy. The way that his running mate comes across. He was
and
focused.
By his running mate, you mean Donald Trump.
And by his running mate, I mean Donald Trump. But he looked focused. He understood the policy. He could communicate the policy. I think that Walz looked nervous in the beginning, and I kind of think that worked for him. His whole thing isn't really this, superstar politician. That's kind of Kamala's thing, that she's the really sharp, smart woman. And he is this like folksy governor who has the experience of government, but also is really a man of the people. And so I felt like there was a lot of Americans that were rooting for him, and they could see that he was nervous, and they felt like, okay, if I was on that stage, I'd also be nervous. And at one point he looked down and you could see his bald head was so shiny. Aww. I was thinking, oh my God, somebody get that man a little bit of powder. But like that awe that people were thinking, I would be in the same position. And I think ultimately once he warmed up, he got into that role of like, I'm the coach, I'm the guy that's going to be the support of America, the heart of America. But I think he missed the boat on really trying to peg himself and juxtapose himself from JD Vance. I think he went overboard in his niceties. And somebody tweeted, like, can these two be president and vice president instead of the other guys? Because it was like the two of them were like embracing at the end. Yeah,
It's
it was
very odd.
I know. But it was kind of nice to see that. I think that America needed a little bit of healing in that way.
America needed a group hug.
They needed
And
a
they
group
got
hug.
it in the most unlikely of circumstances.
It's so
the
true.
vice presidential debate.
Okay, can I bring up one thing before
Yes.
we bring Scott on that has nothing to do with politics?
Yes.
Have you been watching this Netflix show called Nobody Wants This?
Okay, listen to me. I devoured that show in like 2 seatings, which like never happens to me. I feel like I never watch shows from, I feel like I don't do that thing. I kind of save them if I'm on a flight or something.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough.
Same.
Do you love this show?
I did so much laundry this past weekend because I just like hid in my laundry room and watched the show, to be honest. I was like, this is a great excuse.
Who thought that anyone could make a rabbi sexy?
Well, he is. What a babe. What a babe.
I think he like kind of turned the stereotype for rabbis. Like,
I know.
Maybe he gave new, like, exciting, appealing, sexy life to rabbis. Do you think? Like, you're Jewish. Do you think?
Totally. I mean, well, yeah. I hope this like encourages more people to go into the rabbinate. Did they call it? Yeah, and become maybe there'll be an explosion of kids wanting to be rabbis now. But the reason I bring this up is because they have a podcast, the two women in this show, in case you haven't watched it. And it reminded me a lot of you and I, and like the ability to just sit on our mics and talk about our lives and our politics. So I was thinking about you.
But with the big like difference between is we're talking about policy and politics, and they're talking about sex and relationships.
They are very explicitly.
Tell us, dear listeners. If there's a little something missing and you want some of the goods, we can deliver.
We would be the worst sex podcast ever.
We would be terrible.
We'd be like, is that legal? Have they passed a bill on that? Yeah.
Exactly.
No? Oh my God. But I like to pretend we're like that cool, but in the politics world.
Okay.
We'll own it.
Obviously, clearly.
Anyways, if you haven't watched this show, watch it and then let us know if they remind you of us. But way more interesting.
I love this whole pivot. Now we're going to go back to debates.
Yes, sorry about that. That was a wild turn there, curve. Yes, let's go back to debates because, as you know, I love debates and I love debate prepping, and I'm so excited to ask one of the best in the biz about his experience doing this. So we will be right back with Scott Reid. And now a word from our title sponsor, DoorDash. Beyond a Ballot Season 2 is officially powered by DoorDash. Just like we go beyond a ballot, DoorDash goes beyond delivery. DoorDash is committed to helping merchants reach new customers, provide Dashers with flexibility, and by helping everyday Canadians find more time for what matters most. Last week, we heard from OMG Cafe and Tapas in Toronto, Ontario, about how DoorDash has helped them reach more customers outside of their neighborhood. But this is just one example. This year, DoorDash launched the first ever Community Impact Report in Canada, sharing key insights to better understand how the platform is helping to grow and empower Canadian communities. Did you know that 83% of merchants agree that the platform has helped them to get new customers? Or that 1 in 10 merchants said that if not for DoorDash, their business would not exist today? How about the fact that 64% of merchants say third-party delivery frees their time to concentrate on building their business? DoorDash empowers Canadian businesses, Dashers, and entire communities. Stay tuned over the next few weeks to learn more about their Community Impact Report to see the difference that they're making.
I'm so excited because we have a great guest today, Scott Reid, who will be familiar to a lot of people who like to listen to politics the way we do. Mm-hmm. He's the principal and co-founder of Feschuk Reid, which is a comms firm. From 93 to 2006, he served in a whole bunch of senior roles in the federal government, including senior advisor and director of comms to then Prime Minister Paul Martin. He's an on-air political analyst, so you've probably seen him on CTV News or heard him on News Talk 1010. He writes for a whole bunch of papers as well, CBC.ca, iPolitics, and Maclean. So he's got a big resume. Scott, we're so happy And I've known him for a lot of years, I'll say. I've had the chance to work with him and near him on election campaigns. He's the best in the biz. So we're really excited. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, great to see you both. Thank you. And Amanda and I have been friends for a long time. And Rachael and I shared a cab once. So
we did. It's a true story.
It's all pretty tight right
Besties.
So we were just chatting about the vice presidential debate, the one and only that will occur before the election. There's a lot to break down. You've been involved in a lot of debates, debate preps, getting candidates ready for those debates. So I think we'll start by asking your thoughts on last night's debate. How would you break it down?
Well, I thought it was an intriguing debate, but I think it's almost certainly an inconsequential debate in terms of this election. And I know that's kind of conventional wisdom and boring pundit cynicism, but I really don't think in a race this deadlocked that's I think so tight. I think ultimately this race will come down to something that one of the two leading candidates does, or more likely something else that happens. And there's lots to come in this election campaign based on what's come already. It's been one hell of a roller coaster ride. And now obviously we have, here we are on Rosh Hashanah, and we've got war breaking out in the Middle East, perhaps, a spiraling war. And I think that's really, I think, white knuckle territory from an electoral prospect for Harris. I think it's bad for her. So I thought the debate was interesting. I didn't think it's consequential. I had one really weird sidebar take, which is that I think it was a really good debate for Vance, not in the sense that he won the debate, not in the sense that he didn't have the worst moment in the debate, because he did have the worst moment in the debate. But since he was nominated as a vice presidential pick, he has lived a life of misery and agony. He's been the cat lady, the donut guy. He has looked like a fool and a horse's ass.
Yep.
And I think for a guy who wishes to inherit the MAGA movement, who's willing to turn himself into any shape or size or person or personality in order to advance his future prospects, he really needed a night where the MAGA types could cheer him and they could feel confident about his ability to stand and manage himself. And I actually think the worst moment of the night was when he refused to answer who won the 2020 election. He got tagged on it. But for his purposes, as a guy who wants to maybe one day inherit the MAGA movement, maybe that was the best moment of the debate for him, because if it's not going to do one thing or the other for this election, maybe it actually gives him the opportunity to pass the purity test with the Pitchfork group.
Okay, so you say that it was not inconsequential, but I want to talk about debates as a whole, because often I get asked this as a political strategist: do debates matter in campaigns? And in my mind, it's getting your candidate through without too many hiccups. What do you think? Do they move the dial in these races?
Well, debates. And first of all, I think debates do matter. And I think you can make a plausible argument that debates matter more now than maybe they ever have before, because we live in the era of the low information voter, where people drift in and out of campaigns, because we're not as connected as we were. We don't gather around the, blue box at 10 o'clock at night and watch the national news and then have a discussion as millions about what everybody thinks about the same set of images and words. So debates are one of the 2-3 moments where you get a massive audience, where people do dial in. And therefore, I think they have the potential to change elections. I mean, obviously, the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump changed the course of American history. And we know that already. That's been established. You had a sitting president whose performance was so egregious that he couldn't sustain his position as the incumbent and his own party's nominee. I mean, it's startling.
Yeah.
So debates matter. And when it comes to trying to prepare candidates, I'll say one other thing about last night's debate. I've done lots of debate prep for prime ministers, leaders, premiers, mayors, dog catchers, alcoholics, all sorts of different types. And one thing you can't prep them for is nerves. Like, you can try to diminish the vulnerability to nerves by creating that environment, by making it seem as familiar as possible. But with Tim Walz's first 6-7 minutes last night, you really saw that no matter how prepped he was, those Klieg lights went on. He felt that he was on a national stage, and you could see how it really rattled him. It took him. He couldn't find his coach dad act, for like the first half of that debate almost. Yeah. And you can't, there's only so much you can do. You can't inhabit somebody's body. You can't perform for them. And the folks are going to be susceptible to nerves.
Do you think that nerves are like almost endearing to people? Do you think they're relatable, or do you feel like it's just a turn off? Like, oh, get it together.
I think it's a turn off. I think that overwhelmingly when people turn into a debate, or frankly, when my eyes cast over the stage or onto the television screen, people are looking for a projection of confidence. They want people to be declarative. They want them to be strong and clear. I think when I do debate, Pat, people get sick of listening to me say clarity, 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 right? You start getting into these word salads or blathering on or moving into policy jargon, and I'll always interrupt debate prep and say, God damn it, be clear. Clarity. What are we saying? What are you talking about? That's always the thing I preach. And so I think that nerves suggest to viewers a lack of confidence in one's position, and perhaps a sense that they're not as sure of their agenda and their values and their policies as you might think and you might want. And that's probably not fair and almost always not true, but it is, it's what you project when you stammer and you stutter and you spit out the wrong words, or you say fundamentally 6 times in 9 words, which is what Walz did at the beginning of the debate.
So how do you prep a candidate? Like, for people listening that have no context of debates other than to watch a little bit of each of the ones that have been put in front of them, what's the back room doing? Like, when does debate prep start? What are you doing to make sure that they feel comfortable or familiar, as you said?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you guys think and what your experiences have been, so I'll defer to what you think. There is no world according to Hoyle when it comes to debate prep. I think for a long, long time, and, like I was doing debate prep. I can remember doing debate prep with Jean Chrétien. So like we're going back to like, when people moved around in wooden carts and drawn by horses. So, but I've kind of, for a long, long time, I have a fairly doctrinaire view of what debate prep should look like. And I applied kind of like I was that stupid coach that would try to put the same system in no matter what the players and athletes were like. So, my answer to you traditionally would have been, you start meeting quite a long time before debates. When, I was working with, Prime Minister Chrétien and Prime Minister Martin on their debate prep, we would start meeting, either at Stornoway or 24 on Sunday afternoons for 3-4 hours. And we would start with what we call table work. And I call it a little bit of like kind of a accordion prep. And by that, I mean, you go around the table and you just work with paper. Okay. So, what are the hot issues? And you start to do up, kind of debate cards, almost like house cards. If you ever worked as a legislative assistant, here's the issue. And then you get the construction of the answer, right? And you listen to the person talk, you do it in table talk, you take down notes, you pick up on certain phrases, strengths they have, weaknesses, and you write out, start with a value statement. Then you go into where your position is. You critique your opponent. You circle back to what your values and your fundamental position is. If you're going to throw in there some kind of attack, you're going to work on. So you work all that out, and you do that 3-4 hours on a Sunday, and then you come back, you do it another 3-4 hours on a Sunday. I call it accordion prep because it kind of goes like this. It's elastic and it is in its dimensions. You start with just a bare piece of paper. Then you go to a book, a debate prep book that's like as big as New Brunswick. And then if you're doing it right, by the time you get closer to the debate, you start to skin that thing back right down to the bone. And so the accordion, it starts to get smaller and you shrink it because you feel more confident and you reduce the paper, you reduce the clutter, and you reduce the thoughts you're trying to jam into the head of the principal. So you start with all that table work, and then as you get closer, you whittle it down. You really start to focus on what you're going to do. You divide into what you're going to do, the topics that are going to be advised, and the attacks that you want to put on. You add in what we would call like the judo. So I know I'm going to get attacked. So how am I going to reverse that attack and use my opponent's attack against me? And then you start to do, at some point, you do studio work and you start to move into, okay, what's the setting? And then you bring in people to act as the others, and you try to decide how full dress rehearsal do we go. So that's the way I've traditionally done it. I know this answer's longer than the Mackenzie River, but
I like that answer.
That's the way I've
but
sort
it's
of
so much
traditionally
work.
structured it. And one of the things that I've learned maybe in the last 12 years or so is I've encountered a couple of people. I mean, like a lot of leaders, no matter how comfortable they are in their position, it's an unusual thing to prepare for debate. So they'll accept a team and they get into a rhythm and they get into a routine of it. But different people do absorb information and respond to different things. And I think you have to allow for leaders that don't think that way, that don't work that way. And what do you do? And I'll give you an example. I wasn't involved in Prime Minister Trudeau's debate prep, but a close colleague of mine was. And he tried to borrow all the tricks and pulleys that I had built up over the years of stuff I'd worked on, and it didn't work. Trudeau was much more, and I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, particularly since I wasn't there and it's borrowed information, but my friend was struck by how Trudeau wanted to work visually. And so instead of writing the information as much as he wanted to graph the information, he wanted to plot it. And you could tell, and my friend was kind of, at first he was sort of resistant, going, no, this is how we learn Latin, and we're going to sit in our desks and learn Latin. But then they're kind of like, he's doing this in a completely different way. He's much more conscious and wanted to early on think about, well, how am I physically presenting myself, and how do I project what I wish to project, and what do I do when I'm not speaking, but I know I'm being watched, which is something most leaders never think about. And it's a deadly important thing to think about. So just all that stuff. So then you kind of go, wow, that's different. Then I was doing, I remember doing debate prep with Premier Wynne. And, at one point she kind of lost her temper with me. And she's like, I'm not a quit machine. Okay. So don't stop trying to create a dynamic where I then wheel on the other person and I like snap, crackle, and pop a bunch of jokes off. I'm not like you. I'm not like a smart ass. So we have to adjust it. And I was like, she's 100% right. You have to adjust to the leaders. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I think there's a bunch of things and elements that are consistent. I think there's things that are right and wrong to do. I think there's good and bad. But I think you also have to show a certain flexibility for the principal you're working with, and make certain you're serving them and the way that they absorb and learn and improve, because that's what you're supposed to be doing during prep, right? Absorbing and learning and improving, so that by the time you step up on the stage, you can just execute.
Totally. One of the things that we've talked about, and I think most of the listeners have heard about, is this idea that, while there's definitely a group who watch the entire debate, there's a lot of people who just absorb all of the highlights after the fact. The top 5 things that you should see in the debate, or the clips that are clipped and then played all over social media. How much time in debate prep is working toward those big punchlines? Like, you need to get these 5 you need to land the punchlines so that we can get the front page of USA Today or whatever it is.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, it can't come at the expense. This is too simplistic, because there aren't 2 kinds of leaders. I'm sure there's, a garden full of them in terms of type, but there are leaders that want that. They're like, feed me fastballs so I can do that. And then sometimes the danger is that person's only thinking about the smart aleck remark, about the punch across the jaw, and they're not remembering the importance of clarity and consistency and projecting a sort of what's the underlying takeaway here. And so that's it. And then you'll get leaders who are more ponderous and focused on policy. Or often when you're in government, you get trapped in governmentese and programs, jargon, and all of this. And then you have to try to yank those people out of those sitting around cabinet table habits and remind them, at the beginning and the end of your answer, you want to bring the hammer down, and don't forget to crystallize it into this unlayoffable, quotable, memeable moment. So it's a balance depending on who you're working with, but I'd say a lot of time, and you want to get those shots off, and you spend a lot of time, at least I don't know, I always found myself, spend your time, like it's not so much even with them when you're the long hours of prep. It's the long hours before and after prep where you're sitting around by yourself, with your laptop or pen, almost certainly a bottle of whiskey, and you're thinking in detail, how does this unfold? Like we get into a conversation about healthcare, and I know they're going to come at me and say this. So then like, it's kind of like those fantasies when you're driving back from a meeting with like your boss and you're going, and if I had then said this,
Totally.
They would have been eating his hat. And so you sort of try to provoke and imagine those things to the point where you almost say, you can find yourself in rooms saying, okay, but remember, like, here's the setup. Like, if you say this phrase, we know, like Pavlov's dog, your opponent is going to react in this way. And then when they do, you can bring this line in. So you think about it a lot, and you think about it in crazy detail, and you just pray and hope that once in your life, you'll get one of those moments that unfolds in the way that you drew it up on the, on the game board wall.
Oh, yeah. I think the thing that's lost on a lot of people is really the prep that goes into these debates. Like everybody thinks that you just waltz onto the stage and you have all these great lines and you know your policies, when really it's about hours and hours of prep. And I think that you highlight that really well. I want to just shift to a question about moderators, because I have yet to see a debate happen where somebody comes out and is like, you know what? That moderator was really great. Have you ever seen that? Because I feel like the moderator, no matter what they do, they always get the backlash from the debate.
Well, there's two kinds of criticisms of moderators. One is the partisan criticism. They were biased and they were stacked against me and all that kind of stuff. And that's become frequent now. That was less frequent in the past, but I mean, obviously, like I would make the argument that the moderators in the last presidential debate between Harris and Trump were actually very effective. I thought quite on point. And, they corrected the candidates, but they weren't oppressive and obnoxious. They didn't make themselves characters in the debate. So I thought most of the criticism that came from them, from the Trump camp, I think that's all just kind of BS positioning and stuff. And I thought they did do a good job. And there's been other examples where I think you could say that the moderators have done a good job. And then there have been examples where moderators have been dreadful. And I think you can make an argument that, that Quebec question, in the last prime ministerial debate, the leaders' debate here in Canada, I think it was outrageous, and it affected the outcome of the campaign. And I think that's a cautionary tale. If I was ever going to be a moderator or talk to anybody who's going to be a moderator, I'd say, watch that. It's a clinic on how not to do the job.
For the benefit of the listeners, what was that question?
God, what was it now? That was Sachi when she asked the question of what was it about Quebec, and it was.
I know. I'm trying to remember too.
I'm trying to remember. It's terrible.
Feels like 10 lifetimes ago.
Like I remember it happening, but I don't remember what it was. Was it
about the notwithstanding clause, or was it about? Anyway, dreadful. Sorry.
Okay,
I'll have to recall. But
we'll have to go back and rewatch
it. It affected the outcome of that debate, and I think that campaign. I think before it put an explosive blast of momentum, some real rocket fuel behind the Bloc Québécois.
So one of the things that I think is interesting is that people go into watching debates and they're really expecting a fight, right? And we're kind of anticipating the big showdown, and we talk about the 1-2 punches. A somewhat odd thing that happened in the VP debate was the sort of cordial nature that they both took on, like sometimes complimenting each other, sometimes sharing with each other that they'd like to work together. They understood their precarious position. Were you surprised at that? And what do you think the calculus was to decide to be that way from both camps?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. And a lot of people remarked, oh, this is how a debate ought to be. They seem civil. And in particular was that moment when Tim Walz brought up the fact that his son had witnessed a shooting, and you could tell that Vance he said, I didn't know that story. You could see he was affected by it, possibly even a little bit alarmed, because now he's like, oh my God, this is an affecting, personal, individualized. and sympathetic story. And I just look like I don't get it. So I thought that Vance handled himself magnificently. And, by saying, Tim, I didn't know that happened. And geez, I'm really, really sad, really worried that your family had to go through that. And so I thought that was a nice human moment, and it's nice to see those. But by and large, I thought it made a lot of sense for Vance, even though he runs the risk of having Trump scream at him and saying, you should have been, you should have smuggled a dagger into the debate and jumped across and stabbed that guy in his, his Minneapolis heart. But I thought it made less sense for Walz. I expected him to come a little bit harder and check Vance a few times on some of his greatest hits. The fact that we didn't get cat ladies, I thought was quite surprising. Now he's going to do his shtick. Like, you're not going to turn him into somebody he isn't, and you're not going to turn him into a raving attack dog. But he'd been so effective whilst during the campaign of doing that thing where he would smuggle a punch in, with a sort of smiley boxing glove. And I thought we might see more of that. I'll say that I think this is a really big issue when it comes to prep, because we're talking about the mechanics and the modalities and all that kind of stuff, the process of prep. But there is a strategy question, and it lingers over every single candidate's performance in every single debate. And that is how much, and it almost comes down to a binary decision. Do I use this debate as an opportunity to speak to the camera and to the audience by extension? And do I turn it into an infomercial where I use that time to communicate who I am, what I care about, and what my priorities will be? And I kind of just pay as much attention as I'm obligated to my opponent. But by and large, I use it as a 90-minute infomercial. Or do I use it to just cleave my opponent? And I benefit by looking like I'm stronger, sharper, wittier, and revealing their failings. Harris chose that sharper. It surprised me. I didn't expect her to do it in this last debate, where she really went after Trump and she hammered him. So that's gratifying. We like boxing matches, right? Like we like that. So we cheer. So that was gratifying. But I think there's an argument to be made that the opportunity missed was that she didn't communicate as much about herself and her priorities as she might have otherwise. And when you look at the aftermath of the debate, she won it. That's no question. Everybody agrees. But she didn't give herself a 5-point sustained bounce in the polls. And so that's always the big debate. Do you go in as a fighter or an infomercialist? And it's a big strategic decision.
I love that terminology. I'm going to start using that in infomercialist. That's so good. Speaking of boxing matches, let's head back to Canada and talk about Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. What are you anticipating a leaders debate with those two players? And we're going to assume that it's going to be between those two and others. What does that look like? Do you think that Pierre has an edge over Trudeau because of his ability to be such a great orator? Or is Trudeau's past as a drama teacher going to help him in that ring? What do you think?
First of all, I'm not convinced they'll ever square off in a leaders debate. So,
interesting. Why?
It's a big question mark over what will the prime minister do. I know he insists he'll run, but who's to say?
That's right. I'm with you.
If they were to run, if they do end up running against one another and they square off in a debate, I think it's extremely hard to predict from the outside. I'm not trying to cop out, but I think that Trudeau has been consistently underestimated as a debater, and people talk about him being performative and all this sort of thing. But I'll never forget. I'll never forget the foreign affairs debate in 2015, where people thought he was going to get wiped off the stage. It wasn't just a question of expectations. It wasn't just that he surpassed expectations and demonstrated that he could hold his own talking about global affairs. He was flat out the best debater there. He was flat out. He held the audience, and it helped that there was an audience, because you could tell that they responded to him and he responded to their response. But he commanded that stage and that setting. And so I wouldn't sleep on Trudeau, no matter what his polling numbers are. He's a guy who knows how to present in front of the camera. I think that the strength of Polyev is that he is so crystal clear in what he's saying and what his priorities are. And he is so, he is so compact in the way that he will present his priorities. And, sometimes it veers into sloganeering, which I hate. And he's like, we're going to build the houses. We're going to axe the tax, build the houses. We're going to, lace the shoes, and we're going to, whatever, drain the well. And what, I don't know. Like, I hate all that.
I don't think he's trying to drain the well. I think he's trying to put some water in it.
I don't know. And buys a boy, builds a boat, takes it back to Lara. But I think there's things they would both have to watch carefully. I think that the prime minister, particularly where he's at right now, is in a battle in Justin Trudeau mood. And I think that's a bad look for him. I think that when he has succeeded, he has been someone who connects with the middle class, and people say, I know I'm not like him. I'm not that good looking. I'm not that well off. I'm not that fabulous and I'm not that much of a celebrity, but I like him and I'm responding to him. And I think that when he goes hard on the attack and is super partisan, it serves him poorly. The problem is, if you're the prime minister and you're behind, you're like, well, if nobody else is going to take the boots to this guy, I gotta, right? So that's a real challenge for him. How does he find that balance? And I think for Polyev, he really, really, really can get caught up in the intramural logic of everyone hates the things I hate and everyone likes the things I like, and I'll only speak to my vote. Now, his vote right now is large, so he has that luxury, but he can be quite alienating and barbed wire, and he's got that staccato presentation and voice. And I think that in a large dose, in that a situation, he's going to be careful that he doesn't irritate anybody who didn't come in already liking him. I think there's a real risk that he could wear poorly, and so he'll have to be. I'd be a lot more Pierre Polyev in the ads, the guy who's smiling and lifting his child onto his shoulders, and a lot less the guy we see in the House of Commons who's calling everybody, including the cleaners, a name.
It's interesting what's happening in the House of Commons right now. We have, I think, 3 MPs that are currently banned until they either retract their comments or apologize. So one of the things we talk about a lot on this program is how we've sort of descended into the cesspool of toxicity, which really starts at the top. Like, we're watching our elected officials hurl insults at each other. Nobody is immune. Nobody is really taking the high road. Do you think that we will see more of that kind of fighting style, more of that language as we head into what will be the next federal election at any time, any moment between now and next fall?
Well, yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
But I think, and I don't want to split hairs, but I do think there is a difference between spirited combativeness and toxicity. And it isn't just name calling. I'll circle one thing. There may be other factors. I'm not a political scientist or, a language expert, but one thing in particular is when you say something about your opponent that you know to be untrue, that seems to me to be like a thing. So I don't operate on the assumption that I'm obligated to say true things in my critiques. I just have to limit myself to things that are believable. So I might know it's untrue, but if I think somebody might believe it and I say it anyway, well, that's good enough. So I think that's a line that people should try to mind. People don't, and they won't. And once that standard was lowered, I don't know that it's ever going to get reversed. I think another critical thing, really, really, really important is the mindset that you see these days is either I'm right and therefore I'll say it, or I'm justified and therefore I'll say it. So even if it's wrong, you'll hear a lot of, and this side you will hear on both. This one you will hear on both sides, and I'm not both sidesing it. I think that some of the toxicity has been particularly virulent on the right, but I think you do hear people sort of say, like, I said this about well, that's not true. Well, you know what? It's almost true, or it's of a piece it's true. And I'm justified in saying it. It's like, I'm either right or I'm justified, but I'll tell you what I'm not. I'm not taking it back. God damn it. No way. No way, no how. Because even if I was wrong, I'm justified in saying it because my opponent is just that bad. And if they're not guilty of this, or they're guilty of something else. And, like you see this with this guy, this just Genus guy in the house, Genus, Dorcas, whatever his name is there. See, I'm
the bathtub guy.
In the house, he makes a homophobic crack. Then he denies he said it. Then after it's clear that he did say it, he denies that he meant what it obviously meant. Like, okay. All right. You're justified in saying it. There's no situation in which you might say to yourself, you know what? All right, I withdraw. I feel stupid for having gone that far. Nope. I'm either right or I'm justified.
Totally. Rachel, I feel like you have one more.
I sure do. I was gonna make a sweet little rebuttal there to Scott on that one, but I'll hold my personal opinions here. Okay. If you could debate prep any politician in the country, provincial, federal, municipal, who would be the most interesting or the most fun? Who's your dream candidate?
I love that question, Rach.
That's
Thanks.
An interesting question.
I don't even know how I would answer that.
I know. I was like, I'm going to ask you that next.
Well, so I think my answer, would be Polyev.
That's my answer. That's what I was going to say.
I think the guy can be such. I think he is and can be such an effective communicator, but I do think that he has real flaws and vulnerabilities. And so I'd love to do debate prep because I'd like to see how he responds to criticism, how he makes adjustments, how all that works. I don't know him very well. I've not worked with him. I think one of the great tells on leaders and political folk when you work with them is whether or not they can withstand and whether they invite criticism. One of the best debate stories, I probably shouldn't say who, but I was working with a leader one day and we went and we spent the whole afternoon working and I deliberately said to this leader at the outset of the session, I said, why do you want to be prime minister? So they gave me an answer. Then we talked for 4 hours and do all the table work that I was talking about, going through all of it. This person's engagement was intermittent and inexact throughout that. So then at the last, as we're breaking up, I say, listen, why do you want to be prime minister? I give a completely different answer. This is the first day of prep. That's fine. But I pointed out to him, I said, look, I gave completely different answers. And that's intriguing because at least part of that answer should be informed by, well, I have a burning thing that brought me into this, and this is what I'm about, or this is who I want to help, or this is what I want to achieve. And so I think the fact that those answers are not aligned is interesting. It's not a test. I'm not, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but that's important. So first of all, that answer needs to be consistent and it needs to be thought about. And I wanted to just point out, and it was kind of a little bit of an exercise. Well, they did not like that. And at the end of the session, the person said to me, this is maybe not for me. I'm at my best when I'm improvising. And I looked at them and I said, I beg to differ. Because no leader is at their best when they're improvising. If they are improvising and they do well, that means that they got lucky. So I'd like to see Polyev because I'd like to see what kind of environment it creates. Because I could see it being where he's like, absolutely, sock it to me. I want to hear it. I can, because he clearly thinks about comms enough that he can make adjustments. Or would he be resistant and frosty because if it's not something he thinks, he doesn't want to hear it? I think that would be really interesting. I'll give you one other answer quickly. I'd also really, really, really I'd be curious to do Nenshi because I find Nenshi dripping with condescension every time he speaks. I find him really hard to take, and I would want to cure him of that. I would want to say, like, this is what I think you like. Here's some footage of you, and look at it, and or maybe even let's group some clips, and then show. That's another technique you can use. Take some clips of stuff, and then group it, and then show them clips of people, focus groups reacting to how you're presenting and what you're saying, and that can really lift the veil. And I'd love to see how he would react to that because I think that guy has so many ingredients to be successful, but I do think there is this sort of, I find almost impenetrable exterior of get a load of me. and I'd be curious to see whether I could tear that down.
I love that we're ending on that, Scott. That was a goodie.
Yeah.
It was a really goodie.
I'm going to try and connect you with my friend Nenshi.
He's not going to say yes. He's heard me comment about him in the past.
Him and I used to be on TV together every week. So I feel that's interesting. Very interesting.
Well, we never have enough time when we have amazing, informed, witty guests who can share all of their anecdotes and provide us with so many insights. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you taking time out of your crazy busy schedule to be part of ours. And we hope that you'll consider coming back again.
I sure would. Thanks. This has not only been great fun, but it genuinely is a privilege. Great fun. And I noticed that I'm not a woman, so I was excited by that. So thank you for letting me.
You're one of the very few we've had, few men. So welcome. You survived.
You represented well.
We'll line up at the drinks counter. We'll be very quiet and well behaved.
Scott Reid, everyone. Thank you for listening. New episodes air every Friday.
Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and find us at beyondaballot.com.